It has been very easy to get on the negative side of things with all the stuff coming out of Minnesota Vikings headquarters. And so right now it's hard to find a lot of positives in a lot of things with the Minnesota Vikings, but we're going to try hard here today. And the reason why I'm excited is because if Kwesi was truly the problem and there was a lot of things that were going on in Minnesota Vikings headquarters, now that Kwesi is gone, this should be the start of a new era in Minnesota Vikings football with a new interim general manager and Kevin O'Connell pretty much running the show. We will talk about it on the UP.
I don't know who I am. Can I say?
Powered by Riverside FM.
You know, over the past couple of weeks, there's been so much negative talk surrounding the Minnesota Vikings that it has been hard to try to find some bright spots, some silver linings, so to speak. And there's been a smattering of some really, really positive news. Obviously, there's been some new coaches hired, coaches promoted, kind of gives you an insight on the direction that the Minnesota Vikings are going to take in terms of their running game, offensive line coach, so on and so forth. So there's been some good news like that, but it's hard to find it with all the Kwesi adofo-mensah talk. This should be really for Minnesota Viking fans. This should be an exciting time for Minnesota Viking fans. And the reason why I say that, because if Kwesi was truly the problem, and I know there's a lot of people out there, I've seen a lot of videos, I've seen, a lot of people on the internet, they've been talking about Kwesi is being scapegoated. And I don't really look at that. I look at Kwesi having a really, really important job with the Minnesota Vikings. He's the general manager. If you ever known in any industry, if you're the general manager, you are in charge of a lot of stuff. And you may not be directly involved in making every single last decision, but your name is attached to everything that goes on within that organization. The Minnesota Vikings are no different. Kwesi adofo-mensah is no different. He was in charge. There was a lot of failures in that organization, a lot of things that he was blamed for, regardless of whether you think that's fair or not. He's the general manager. Thus, he was fired by the Wilfs from being general manager from the Minnesota Vikings organization. So now we all knew as fans that there was a lot of messed up stuff going on, even though we couldn't see it directly, that we were not in the building. We knew that J.J. McCarthy wasn't necessarily ready to step on the field last year, and who made that decision. We knew that there was some bad draft picks. We knew that there was some bad free agency signings. So there was a lot of things that we could visually see with our eyes where we knew that something was wrong. And ultimately, now that Kwesi is gone, a lot of things are coming out, stories behind the scenes of maybe things that Kwesi did to kind of screw things up. So much so that when it came to evaluating talent, the coaching staff took more of a sense of urgency in terms of getting out and going to evaluate players because they felt like Kwesi just didn't have that eye. Well, now, the point that I'm trying to make is that Kwesi is gone. So all the troubles that we have been having, all the troubles that you have been seeing with your eye, may not having the whole story, this should be a time where it is going to get cleaned up. We have an interim general manager. We have B-Flow, who is probably going to take care of the defensive side of the ball. Again, nothing has been officially announced. This is just kind of assuming. And then Kevin O'Connell is probably going to oversee everything, have input on everything. He's the head coach, but again, he's going to concentrate on the offensive side of the ball. So a lot of the things that are going on within the office that probably wasn't up to par is now going to get fixed. Even if the interim stays until after the draft and he doesn't get the job and then they go out and a lot of names are being bantied about, even if it's a new GM, you are going to get the change. You have identified the problem. which supposedly was Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, and now is the time for change. This is fully on the shoulders. I think it would make sense to say that this is fully on the shoulders of Kevin O'Connell. I think in 2026, I think it's safe to say that he's going to be coaching for his job. So if he is going to cook the meal, he should be able to buy the groceries, so to speak. You guys following me? So this should be an exciting time. The problem is gone. This is the way that the Minnesota Vikings are painting it. The problem is gone. Now things should be fixed. Now things should be changed. I can't wait. We should be headed in the right direction. That is what I'm excited for. The draft pick should be a lot better. There's been arguably some moves that, and it's coming out that KOC wanted to make that he wasn't allowed to make because Kwesi was kind of the cog in the plan. When you look at KOC, here's the area that I'm really excited about, UP Nation. Because I can honestly say, looking at all of the information coming out and looking at what I know to be true with the Minnesota Vikings in terms of following this team, the question that I want to ask you, UP Nation, is has Kevin O'Connell really ever had the quarterback that he wanted? You see, when he came in from the Rams, he inherited Kirk Cousins. That wasn't really his pick. And if you know anything about Kirk Cousins is a very cerebral, smart, intelligent quarterback. For some instances, in my opinion, I think Kirk Cousins overthinks a lot of situations, and I think it hurts his game. Kirk Cousins can make all the throws. Kirk Cousins has an arm. Kirk Cousins is a smart individual, but I think he overthinks. When you watch the Netflix series Quarterback and Kirk Cousins was on there, it gave you a really good glimpse of what he goes through before games, after games, how he overthinks things, has a sports psychologist. And when you have all of this stuff in your head, at times it can become a little bit noisy. And I think that has been the biggest detractor from Kirk Cousins' game is that his brain is so busy, he over-evaluates. I've coached players like that a lot in my lifetime as a coach. It just happens. But he inherited Kirk Cousins. Nick Mullins wasn't necessarily his guy. They traded for the Pastronaut, but we all know that the Pastronaut wasn't necessarily his guy. We could go so on. We could continue to go on. Carson Wentz, Max Brosmer, and then the elephant in the room is J.J. McCarthy. There's been rumors, information that has come out about J.J. McCarthy, who wanted him. Did Kevin O'Connell want him or did Kwesi Adofo-Mensah want him? It sounds like, I've heard it from both sides, that they both wanted him. Kwesi wanted to get him on the field as quickly as possible. Kevin O'Connell thought that maybe he wasn't ready. And there's also stories that maybe Kevin O'Connell really didn't want him. He was all in on Drake May. Kwesi couldn't get the deal done with Drake May. Then he wanted Michael Penix, couldn't get Michael Penix. They got leapfrogged by Atlanta, and so they had to settle for J.J. McCarthy. So my question remains, has Kevin O'Connell ever really had the quarterback that he wants? My answer would probably be no. Other than inheriting guys, wanting to keep guys like a Daniel Jones. I know he wanted to keep Daniel Jones. He wanted to keep Kirk Cousins. Sounds like he was semi-interested in Aaron Rodgers, but he's never, looking at all the stuff that's coming out about J.J. McCarthy, he has never really had a guy that we can honestly say, this is Kevin O'Connell's guy. I wonder what that looks like. What is the prototype quarterback that Kevin O'Connell really likes? I wonder about that. See, to me, that's a mystery because he flirts with all kinds. the Aaron Rodgers of the world. Aaron Rodgers is completely different than Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones is completely different than Sam Darnold. There were rumors that the Minnesota Vikings and Kevin O'Connell were interested in Anthony Richardson coming out of Florida. So much so that when the Minnesota Vikings played the Indianapolis Colts and Richardson was on the bench, Kevin O'Connell made it a point to go find him, give him a hug, and tell him basically, and I'm paraphrasing, you're a bad boy, man. You're going to get your opportunity to get back to being a starting quarterback. Kevin O'Connell did not have to do that. So it lets me believe that Anthony Richardson is really he's interested in a quarterback that has the attributes that Anthony Richardson has. Kind of strange, right? Anthony Richardson completely different than Sam Darnold. See, this offseason is going to tell me a lot. Because Kevin O'Connell, this is a new era. Kevin O'Connell is going to be in more control of the Minnesota Vikings franchise than he's ever been. And it's going to give you an insight on who he really is and what type of quarterback he really likes. Now, he may not be able to go out and get the Joe Burrows, although I do think they're going to try to make a run at that. He may not be able to pull that off. But the type of quarterbacks that they negotiate with or bring in or express interest in is going to give you an insight on, for the first time, this is why I call it a new era. For the first time, it's going to give you an insight on the type of quarterback that Kevin O'Connell really wants. We haven't been able to see that because everything is painted now with the fingerprints of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Like there is nothing, no decision, no personnel decision, nothing that has happened with the Minnesota Vikings organization where you can truly say that it was a decision made by Kevin O'Connell because Kwesi was there. Everything. Hell, Kwesi made the coffee wrong in the morning in the building from all the stuff that's coming out of Egan and Minnesota Vikings headquarters. So any information that you get from the past, you just can't trust it. Now Kwesi's out of the way. It's going to be a combination of different people. The interim general manager, B-Flow, and KOC. But KOC is going to have the most influence out of everybody. So you're going to get an idea for the first time in 4 years what KOC is all about. That is what I am excited about. I want to see the type of quarterbacks that he likes. Who is he going to go after? Is he so comfortable with Kirk Cousins? Odds are Kirk Cousins is going to be released before March 14th. Will they flirt with Kirk Cousins and bring him back? Was he so enamored with Daniel Jones as Daniel Jones is recovering from his Achilles? Do they go that route? I've heard Kyler Murray. To me, it doesn't fit, but who knows? So when you talk about all the negative stuff coming out about the Minnesota Vikings, the silver lining is that in this UP Nation is that we are finally going to have what has been troubling this organization in terms of Kwesi, and now we get to put it all on the shoulders of our head coach, and we get a chance to see what he can do. Like you've got to be interested in that. That's why I'm not super upset with the Kwesi stuff because I felt like he needed to go, and now we're going to put it in the hands of Kevin O'Connell, who seems to imply or seems to show you every day by his actions that he knows more about football than anybody. He has now become the smartest guy in the room. See, Rob Brzezinski is a cap guy, not necessarily a personnel guy. He's been with the Minnesota Vikings for 20 plus years. But for 2026, I think the load is going to be put on Kevin O'Connell. I've been thinking about one thing with this whole Kevin O'Connell Kwesi thing. There was a report that came out. And again, I don't want to just give you and report the news to you, I want to give you little tidbits to think about. Like this whole Kevin O'Connell era. Shouldn't we be excited about that? The problem has been erased. The problem has been removed from the room. So everything should be better. It should get better, right? So when you look at Kevin O'Connell, the one thing that has been bothering me, again, not just reporting the news, I just want to get you to think, there's been reports that Kevin O'Connell expressed to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah that he felt like J.J. McCarthy wasn't quite ready. He felt like J.J. McCarthy wasn't quite ready. He wanted to keep Sam Darnold. He wanted to keep Daniel Jones. He wanted to think about bringing an Aaron Rodgers in. And from what it sounds like from the reports, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah ixnayed all that and said, no, we need to go with J.J. McCarthy. They brought in Sam Howell. That didn't work. Wasn't very good. They brought in Carson Wentz as backups, but no one to really threaten J.J. McCarthy. And Kevin O'Connell told Kwesi, he told him, man, this kid is he's just not ready. He's just not quite ready. And then we come to find out that Kevin O'Connell was probably right about that. But here's something to think about, UP Nation. If this story is true, and all we can do is go by what is being reported and what we hear, we don't have a seat at the table in Eagan at Minnesota Vikings headquarters. But let's think about this. Here's what I want you to think about. And this is what I was thinking about the other day when I was sifting through all the stuff that was coming out. If Kevin O'Connell went to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and told him, JJ is not quite ready. I just don't think he's ready. If that is accurate, Kevin O'Connell went into that season knowing that he had a 22-year-old quarterback that was not ready to play. Not only was J.J. McCarthy not ready to play, but J.J. McCarthy was going to be playing behind an inefficient offensive line, broke up at the start of the season. You guys remember that. Christian Darrisaw was not in there. Ryan Kelly was not in there. I mean, it was a patchwork offensive line. He put that kid behind that offensive line. Okay? Not only did he put him behind that offensive line, but he didn't scale back the pure progression offense one bit. 5, 6, 7-step drops. Look down the field vertically behind a patchwork offensive line. And you're talking about one of the smartest coaches in the league in terms of X's and O's. You may have a question with his situational game, his play calling. That's well and fine. But the one thing you can't argue is that Kevin O'Connell knows X's and O's. He was the offensive coordinator of the Los Angeles Super Bowl champion Rams. He was instrumental in designing plays for Cooper Kupp, who had stellar years for the Los Angeles Rams. So no matter what you think about Kevin O'Connell, he may not be the best situational guy, best play caller, but you can't question his acumen when it comes to X's and O's in football. He put this 22-year-old kid behind this patchwork offensive line with a vertical passing game, no quick game, knowing that he had already expressed and knew in his heart that J.J. McCarthy wasn't quite ready. Now let that sink in. Let that marinate for a little while. He didn't scale back the offense every step of the way. He was talking about footwork and eyes and rhythm. There was no slants. There was no quick game. There was no tunnel screens. There was no bubble screens. There was no RPO. We were one of the last ranked teams In the NFL, in terms of rushing attempts, we were one of the highest ranked teams in terms of throwing the ball on third and short situations in the NFL. Just let that sink in. You have such a sense of urgency at one point before the season starts to go to the general manager, to go to Kwesi and say, hey, man, I just don't think JJ is ready. To put it in simple terms, it's like you're going to the principal of a school and say, hey, my class is not, my general math class is just not ready for advanced math. And the principal says, well, you've got to construct a curriculum in your class to help those students, and you give them calculus every day. That's what happened with JJ McCarthy. Think about that, man. Let that sit in. And as soon as you started to scale back what you were doing with JJ McCarthy, instantly it got better. I mean, because we're talking about some bad football. We're talking about historic statistical data, some of the worst that has ever been played in the NFL. We got to see that this year. But then we also got to see on the other side of the coin when they stopped talking about footwork and eyes and rhythm. They leaned a little bit more heavy on the running game. They gave JJ McCarthy some simple throws. At the end of the season, it looked better. Not only did it look better, but we won 5 games to end the season. Think about this. When have you ever seen in the NFL a team so night and day? It rarely ever happens. It's a unicorn. Think about what I'm saying. So with all of that knowledge, it makes you wonder, was KOC trying to prove a point? Was it just trying to fit a square peg in a round hole? Was it as simple as, doesn't matter who the quarterback is, experience, non-experience, 38 years old, 22 years old, you are going to run my system? Was it that? I thought about that yesterday. All the stuff. Sometimes you got to sift through the BS. I thought about it. I remember that quote. I remember it being reported that KOC went to Kwesi to express before the season started that JJ McCarthy wasn't ready. But then once you got to roll with him, you give him the calculus instead of the general math. And you know he wasn't ready. Why? Why? If you got an answer to that, UP Nation, put it in the comments. Put it in the comments. What's your thoughts about that? If KOC expressed that JJ McCarthy wasn't ready, now this is a guy that's been around a lot of quarterbacks, Super Bowl champion, offensive coordinator, seen everything, done everything, played the game, was a pretty decent quarterback in his own right, college, didn't quite make it in the NFL. Why would you give the kid that you know wasn't ready one of the hardest game plans in the world to do every Sunday? Your boy Kirk Cousins even came out and said, hey, man, that pure progression stuff, that is hard. That's coming from Kirk O'Chain's professor calculus. If he thinks it's hard, man, what the hell is a 22-year-old kid going to feel, going to think? It's going to be overwhelmed. But you knew he wasn't ready. Put your thoughts in the comments, man. This has been Unconventional Playbook. Please hit that like and subscribe button. I am excited about the new era of Minnesota Vikings football under KOC's direction. Can't wait. This has been Unconventional Playbook. And again, hit that like and subscribe button. And as always, UP Nation, we will see ya when we see ya. Sco.